So we have to first understand what defines a youthful face. And I think if you look at a lot of people out there that have had plastic surgery, they don't look more youthful. They just look a little tighter, but they don't look more youthful, and their identity has been taken away from them. And that's a big problem. So we have to fundamentally understand youth. Now, a lot of times when I show this photograph, I get two responses from my female patients. Number one, I don't need to look 24. Well, maybe 20% say yes. But most people say, I just want to look a little bit better. But we have to understand in our society, the concept of youth and the ideal of youth is someone youthful, and that's what we consider beautiful. And a lot of times when women look back at themselves and they find what time period they thought they looked the best, it was between 28 to 32. And that's because that full face of the early to mid-20s begins to lean in a bit, but it's not quite hollow and there's not quite a sag going on just yet. So we first have to understand what is desirable. And the way that I do that is I use your old photographs. And that's fundamental, because if we don't have a blueprint for our design of form and shape, because what is so fundamentally important is my position is I take care of form and shape. You take care of skin and wrinkles. We work together as a team. So what I want to take a step back and look at this shaped face, what happens is the daughter on the left and the mother on the right, yes, there's extra weight as we get older. Yes, there's some gravity. But there's another change that I want you to focus on, which is an inversion of the triangle. The triangle I'm referring to, you saw in Christy Brinkley, is a heart-shaped face. That heart-shaped face inverts. Now why? Because we gain weight here, we have a little gravity in the lower face, and we also lose the volume. We flatten in our upper face. So what I want to challenge you today is to rethink everything you know. You may not have to reject everything, because I'm not a purist in my philosophy. I'm also putting everything together, and you'll see that in my photographs in a moment. So here's a reductionist philosophy that you can think about. When we're young, we're full ripe grapes. As we get older, we become a raisin. So the question I pose to you today is, why should we take that raisin, cut, pull, stretch, lift until it becomes a pea? Because does a pea look like a grape, or does a grape look like a grape? Ask yourself, after plastic surgery, do you look like the same person? This is a major problem we're having. Here's the other thing. As estheticians, you're very focused on the details. I'm focused on the big picture, on the going back and looking at everything together. So we can work together as a team, and I want you to understand, oftentimes, I hate to say, women are their own worst critics, because the way that they evaluate the face is using an 8x, 10x magnifying mirror 2 inches away. Now why is that? Because you put makeup on. You don't want your makeup running one way or the other way. But I want you to understand, how do you see me and how do I see you? We see each other through a social encounter of maybe, say, 5 or 10 feet away, where we're just basically looking at each other at a social distance with normal, uniform overhead lights. So all my before and after photographs are rigorously controlled with just overhead lights. Not a stark light like I'm on the stage, but a uniform overhead light. I've controlled it. So think about that. If you use fill and flash photography, you're distorting reality, okay? Okay, so let's summarize. These are the 3 things I want you to focus on that right now are still a bit vague and a bit foggy. It won't be foggy in a few minutes. Volume and shape, inverting the triangle, flipping the triangle back to that heart-shaped face of youth. Highlights and shadows, creating beautiful highlights in the right places, and you're eliminating shadows in the wrong places. And finally, exactly the opposite of what you think about the eye. Put the frame back in. Don't suck it out. Okay. Where have we gone? You know what's exciting? No incisions. We've moved from big incisions, tiny incisions. There are no incisions. There are no bandages. There are no sutures. Patients come, now I've got a gentleman coming from Rome I'm going to work on. I've got people flying in from Hawaii and London for one day. They fly out the next morning because there's nothing to cut. There are no incisions, no bandages. So that's where we've come, right there. That's, to me, profoundly intriguing. Since we're moving to minimally invasive procedures, Why don't we move to a completely non-invasive approach? So let's start with the most important thing, because if I make your jawline straight and you look exhausted, have we accomplished anything? That's a question. Tiredness. Let's get looking rested. 41-year-old model. Used to model. Now she models again. If you want to see this, look at what's going on with the eyes. Very subtle, right? You go, well, I don't see much difference, but she looks rested. She looks feminine. She looks younger. It's because I covered bone. When you cover bone of the upper face, you look youthful. You create the triangle that's there, and you frame the eye down. Look at the brow. Look at the the contour of the brow. It's been pushed down. It's the opposite of what you've been programmed to think, because you always have the two-finger rule, right? This, oh, I look so much better. When I used to do brow lifts and do this, the patient would go, that's all fine and good, doctor, but I don't even look like myself when you do that. Is that a problem? Absolutely. I think a brow lift masculinizes the face. And when we deal with women, we feminize. I have a whole different rule and way of approaching a male patient. So look at these eyes here, Hispanic woman here. All of this is done with no incisions, not one single cut on the skin. I did take the bag out, but through a no incision approach on the skin, and all you're seeing on the upper eyelid is fat. I filled it. Take a good look at that upper eyelid sulcus, that crease. It's really high. And sometimes it goes lower, sometimes it goes higher. If the actual skin hangs over the eyelid crease, I'll take a little bit of skin, but that's it. No fat, no lifting. But that's only probably 1 out of 5. What I'm showing you today is that volume. I actually push that brow crease down over the eyelid. And what I want you to study is not the crease. It's that little bit of the sulcus, that little bit of indentation. That's bone showing through. When you cover the bone, you create convexity, you lower the brow, you create youth, period. This lady had a facelift on the left. And I want you to see that it didn't do anything. Everything you're seeing on the right side is filling with fat. The brow, the lower eyelid, the cheek, the jawline. There was not an incision made. Do I do facelifts? Yes, and I'll show you when and where. Those eyes, what would you cut? Is there anything left to cut? There is nothing there. It's skin shrink wrapped on bones. Are you going to lift her brows? Are you going to cut? Well, that's what her twin had, and the twin doesn't look rested. I filled it. Just filled it. When you fill that eye and that cheek, and you cover the bone, you create youth. You create a beautiful, soft, feminine, rested look. Brian, we can advance. So let's talk about the next concept, the form and shape, inverting a triangle. I want you to think about the big picture, how to shape a face that looks youthful, and that's going to be critical. Look at this photograph here. As you see, she needs a facelift, right? Not in your 40s. So I just filled it. That's a jawline fill. So do you look fatter after fat, or you look slimmer? You look slimmer. Because what makes someone heavy is down here. I actually take people that are even slightly overweight and slim their face down. Do you see that triangle being flipped? I want you to understand that that's the key to femininity restedness. Even not when you're seeing the eyes based on the patient request, you can still see restedness. Does she look heavier after the fat, or does she look slimmer? There was no facelift. There was no liposuction. It was just filling. I did take a tiny bit of skin from the upper eyelid. That's the only thing else I did for her. And now she's got a gorgeously rested, feminine, soft face. 55-year-old lady, does she need her skin removed? Does she need a facelift? No, no. This is just filling with fat and creating the volumes of beautiful youth, framing that eye and inverting the triangle. You can see both features here pretty clearly. And she looks less heavy. If you look at those eyes, eye bags removed? Nope. Skin removed? No. Brow lift? No. Facelift? No. Just filling with volume. And now I've created a beautiful triangle back to that eye. And you know what's amazing is my patients look good 40 feet away. And we talk about skin, right? Well, you know what's amazing? I'm going to show you some amazing photos in a moment. But I want you to understand why their skin looks so much better. Did I trick the photography? No, it's just overhead lights. What I did was I created volume. And if you think about what real-world existence we live in, we live with overhead lights. So when lights come down and hit our face, it's beautifully full. When it's hollow and sallow, there is no light that hits it, and the skin doesn't look good. So the first step of making the skin look good is letting light hit it. If there's no light on it, it doesn't look good. And that's what's so powerful, is creating volume. Let's talk about limiting transitions. Is it just putting some volume in different ways? Well, the lady on the your left, my right, your left, had a cheek implant, a chin implant, and a facelift. Does she look rested, youthful, feminine, or does she still look exhausted? Here's the problem with an implant. Well, first of all, most people don't want an implant. I don't want an implant if I can avoid it. But here's the thing. An implant has several problems. Number one, remember we get bony around the upper face. You put an implant in there, what does it look like? It looks like either bone or an implant. That's a problem. The next problem, when you create volume of that cheek and you don't balance it with the lower eyelid and the area below the cheek, what do you create? More hollowness, more transitions. You actually exacerbate those transitions. That's a real problem. You want to create convexity, luminosity is a great word, and balance, so that everything is balanced. And I think I did a better job at a facelift without a facelift, without an incision. I just put a little fat into the pre-jowl, the area that just is in front of the jowl, than even the facelift. And how about men? Do they need eyelids cut? No, look at Tom Cruise. It's a low, full brow for even men. So I think cutting on male eyes can actually feminize it and make it look unusual. So the gentleman on the left has had scars and cuts and everything, and all I did was on the right is just blend a little bit, because he's already been overcut. I just brought him back and blended the transitions and softened and brought convexity. And look at that jowl. I'm sorry, it's hard to see on this image, but the jowl has been softened even without a facelift. Okay, here's the key. Do you want to look different? I don't think many people do. I don't want you to look different. I start with your old photographs. And which old photograph? You tell me. We'll sit down together with your photos in your 20s, your 30s, and the youngest person I did was the 30-year-old. You think I must be crazy, right? But it's such an easy procedure, done in less than an hour without incisions. And when you get a lot of sun early on, you really hollow out, even sometimes in your early 30s. So the great thing is I can do everything in less than an hour without an incision. And I can bring it back to where your age should be, an age-appropriate look. So let's look at some examples of old photographs. Here's a lady that's just turned 40. Wow, that's a young lady. Doctor, what are you doing? Why don't you be working on older women? But look at her on the left. She already had a brow lift and upper eyelid on the left, and she still looks exhausted. That's a problem. Take a look at this eye. It still looks heavy to you, right? But what I did was I made it heavier, because if she had gone back to her surgeon, she would have had more skin cut, more brow lifted. But hold on, look at her photo. It's hard to see up there on the top right. She has no crease, a barely perceptible crease. If she had gone back and had another brow lift and another skin cut, the crease would have been way wide. Her brows would have been way looking unusual. And thank God the brow lift dropped a little bit. So now it's probably looking a little bit more normal than it did 4 years ago. But here's a trick. I made that brow that perceptually looks heavy to you heavier. I made it 3 times heavier. Now, why does your eye not perceive that as being heavy? For 2 reasons. Number 1, it's convex. Convex is round. Number 2 is that it's balanced with the cheek. If I just fill that brow by itself, there's no balance. You have to have a good aesthetic eye of balancing. I'm going to show you some examples where I didn't fill the brow, and why. For balance sake, for artistry. And if you look at her, she looks restful, feminine, youthful. Not before, not when she had the brow lift. And she looks more like she did at 28. That's after a large incision brow lift on the left. Does that look rested to you? I did a mini facelift at 55, and I did volume enhancement for the face. No cutting of the eyes, just adding volume. And that's what's powerful. She looks more rested. She looks like she did at 40. No cutting except for the lower neck. Everything, and that's the only thing I lift today, is just the lower neck. Everything from here up should not be lifted. No mid-face lifts anymore, and I wrote the book on mid-face lifts 5 years ago, but I don't do them anymore. I wrote the book on brow lifts. Don't do it anymore. I only lift the neck when it's necessary. So this lady, we focused on wrinkles and everything. Well, you know what's interesting? She's on Accutane. And as estheticians, you probably know that you can't make a single incision if you're on Accutane. Well, I didn't. That's what's so great about this. But what was the problem? Is it just the folds? I rarely fill folds anymore because they don't matter. And fat doesn't work well for 2 things. The reason fat has had such a bad rap is it's been placed in areas that don't work well consistently. Lines and lips. And you get this deforming swelling for weeks. That's terrible. I videoed all my recoveries on my website, so you can see it's not a bad recovery. The first week you don't look bad and look great, but by the time you hit your 2nd week, it's coming down where you need to be, and it doesn't even begin to look good. I mean, like crazy good, until 6 months to a year and beyond. I thought fat went away. Hold on. You can see it's not the lines, it's not gravity. I added volume, that's all. It's deflation. How about the lady on the left? That's after a lot of surgery. Does she look rested and youthful and feminine to you? Or did I get her closer? That's the question. And look at her in her mid-30s. Did the other physician even ask to look at her old photos? Of course not. No surgeon has. I use that as my starting point. I had one patient come up to me and said the other surgeon actually tore her old photo up and threw it away. For me, it's predicated upon your identity, so I don't steal it from you. I return it to you. So does fat go away? That's about 6 months out. That's 2 years out. It's held beautifully. This is a lady I did a facelift, 62-year-old, little upper eyelid, fat grafting, lip enhancement, and this is about 6 months out. And let's take a look at her now at a year. It's even softened further. It's even blended better. Look at the lines around her mouth. I did nothing for them. Nothing, zero, zilch, nada. I just filled it. And sometimes the wrinkles can begin to actually fade. Not all the time. Again, that's a variable response, but it's an amazing change. It does occur in a majority of my patients. Something about the skin looks better, except for the guys. Here's a lady at 6 weeks, 51-year-old, facelift and fat grafting. Not bad, but there's a swollen quality to the face, right? Some people love that. I call it honeymoon swelling. Anytime anyone's had a facelift or something cut upon, they get that little temporary swelling. They go, God, I love that. And it went away. You needed fat to begin with. It helps you understand it. But let's look at her over a period of a year. This is 6 months out. And you know what's amazing with a photograph on your right? She's had no sleep. And she still looks more rested, less than 1 hour sleep. She said, doctor, don't take a photograph of me today. I said, yes, I will, because it's a perfect time to show that. Now let's look at her at 14 months. And let's compare her to a photograph in her late 30s. Did I get her closer? I created a frame to that eye. Look at where the crease started. Where did I put it? I put it down, lower, even lower. So that's what's a tricky little thing here. Unfaking the fake. 50% of my work is unfaking the fake. Taking someone that looks like, oh my God, what happened, to back to normal. That's powerful. Let's look at some things. This is a Hispanic woman in her 50s, had over-resected brows, eyelids, lower eyelids, everything sucked out of her. She couldn't even recognize herself anymore. If you want to listen to her testimonial in Spanish, it's on my website. I've got hundreds of video testimonials and videos. If you look at her, it's not a perfect result. Remember, the lines don't disappear with fat, but it's a volume contour of the eye. I reframed it, I brought back, and now she has her identity back to her. This lady on the left had everything pulled out of her eyes, hollow and pulled down with rounding. The eyelid position's even improved. After this is an interesting story. She's from California. She came to me 1 year and 2 weeks out. This is exactly a little over a year. She came to me after I fixed her by volumizing her, and she said, doctor, I really want to get a good comparison between the before and after, so I'm going to come in with no makeup on the after. So, and if you want to look at how consistent my photographs are, I have a whole page of describing how I maintain consistency in photographs. And that amount of light that hits that face makes her look rested and balanced. Now here's a trick. This lady, I didn't actually fill her brows. I only filled the lower face because her brows were sticking out about ½ an inch forward. And Constance, who works with me, my patient care coordinator, said, Dr. Lamb, what are you going to do to make her brows look good? I said, just wait till you come to the recovery room. Well, she came and she goes, oh, her brows look beautiful, what'd you do? And the trick is I did nothing for them. Because if you pull the lower face forward, you draw it in alignment with the upper face. So I take thin faces and widen it. I take wide face and I thin them. I bring the face into aesthetic harmony. You have to have a good eye to create this. And so you can see their eyelid position's actually improved. And if you look at a 3/4 view, you can actually see that the brow is in alignment with the cheeks and the lower face. And so now it doesn't look so prominent. Bonuses. These are the little things that may or may not happen. This is a lady that had a bad cheek implant done in Dallas. And I did a flat reconstruction of it. Then I contoured the face with fat to rebalance and sculpt all the areas. And that's what you can do, is you don't have to put fat symmetrically. You have to have a good eye in how to balance a face. And that's what I've done to create at least a little bit more, also youthfulness, at the same time balance.